I recently reread Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, and one line essentially kept circling back. A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction. Simple, sharp, and true. Hello, my name is Jasmine, and I am a yapper. Also, I've been told since I was a kid, so must be true. I'm someone who's wanted to create content for a while, but I have ADHD, and ADHD comes with a lot of branches of interest, so I could never really decide what to niche down on. But I did set myself a goal for this year, and it's that I want to create more than I consume. And I guess one of my ways of lowering my consumption is to actually do that financially, and I decided to start with books. Because I have a really bad habit of stepping into anywhere that has a book and walking out with one. I decided to dig out a Kindle that was given to me while I was at university, and I've used it for the first time. I found myself going onto Project Gutenberg and looking to see what they had available for download, and I rediscovered an essay I read quite some time ago called A Room of One's Own. And honestly, I think rereading this essay actually gave me the push that I needed, because this essay actually discusses that creative freedom requires both space and resources, not as luxuries, but rather as prerequisites. Honestly speaking, for a long time, I thought that if I worked hard enough, I wouldn't need either of these. And truth be told, I was wrong. I think finally understanding that is the reason why I'm finally in a place where I'm actually ready to put myself out into the world. Wolf's room isn't just four walls, but rather it's permission to think without apology. Personally, for me, as someone who's neurodivergent, that permission has always looked like structure. Quietly chaotic, predictable routines, knowing that I won't be interrupted mid-thought. Money buys time and space protects attention, right? But when rent, bills, or family obligations press in, I think it's fair to say that creativity gets squeezed into whatever margins are left. And I know that's not just my story alone, but rather it's structural. It's how the system works, and upon reflection, it's fair to say that the system is designed to keep some of us on the edges. Of course, the world that Woolf wrote about has changed. Typewriters have become laptops, block libraries have become algorithmic feeds. Digital platforms can open doors. I won't pretend that they haven't made publishing more accessible in some ways, but I also find that they demand constant visibility. And to me, this actually fragments attention. The interruptions that Woolf named in 1929 are still here, but they've just changed shape a little bit. Now they ping, they notify, and they ask you to perform your creativity before you've even had the chance to make it. So what does a room look like today? Well, there's the obvious one, the physical room, which may look like a studio or a shared working desk. For me personally, it's my noise-cancelling headphones and my own bedroom that I can lock. But also in the new age, it's fair to say that this room can be digital, a passworded draft, a private server, or somewhere where the algorithm can't reach you. It might be an online document that no one else has access to, a place where your first draft can be messy and half-formed, but yours. I also think that the new kind of rooms can be psychological, especially in the age of social media, where I now find, and I'll just speak for myself here, but I find myself having to set a boundary that says, I will write now, I will not scroll, and I will not explain myself. Realistically speaking, I would say that the psychological room is unlearning the idea that you need permission to start. But here's the complexity, because not everyone can actually access all three. A physical room, for instance, requires money. A digital room would require technology, privacy, and let's be honest, with the state of subscription culture, also money. And a psychological room would require unlearning years or even sometimes generations worth of being told that your voice doesn't matter. I would view the act of carving out any of these as an act of resistance, but the thing is, carving them out doesn't necessarily guarantee that you'll feel safe enough to share what you create. Because even with a room, sharing feels risky. Sure, there's the concept of rejection, but if you're someone who's maybe from a minority group, there's also tokenization. Being invited into spaces only when your difference is useful. Being told that your work is important while watching the marketing budget go towards someone else's work. Pitching the same idea 3 times, but having to hear, sorry, we already met our diversity quota. And then there's also the quiet worry that your story is too specific, too niche, not universal enough. as if universal hasn't always meant that one particular kind of story gets told by one particular kind of person. And then there's also the preemptive exhaustion, knowing that you'll be asked to explain, defend, or soften your work in ways that others aren't being asked to do so, knowing that the labour of translation is expected before your work is even ready. Woolf also imagined Shakespeare's sister, who was silenced by a world that had no space for her genius. Today, the silencing is subtler. It's opportunities that require twice the labour, doors that open just a crack, and the exhausting question of, is it even worth it? And I'll speak for myself here, but even in my own rooms, the voices followed me. And I've come to realise that the voice is the internalised editor who isn't just about craft anymore, but rather about survival. It's constantly calculating the risk before I've even produced a single bit of work, and that tends to stop me from actually producing anything at all. And perhaps it's because I'm a little bit older now and I've grown more into my identity on the ethnic side, but rereading Woolf through a BAME lens showed me what she got right and essentially what she couldn't see, because economic reality matters and it's not abstract. Picture this: you get offered a 6-week residency. Unfortunately, it's unpaid. You'd still have to take time off work, arrange childcare, cover travel, and also accommodation. While for some people that's inconvenient, for others it's straight up impossible. And that to me shows that it's not about talent nor commitment, but rather who can afford to say yes. I did a bit of digging and I found that the data shows that this isn't anecdotal. Ethnicity pay gap analysis in the UK shows persistent differences in median pay across groups. You then layer gender onto that, the gap grows even more, particularly for Bangladeshi women and also for many black women. Unemployment and economic inactivity also varies by ethnicity, which directly affects who can afford unpaid creative work, who can say yes to an opportunity that doesn't pay, and overall who can take the risk. These aren't just statistics because they translate into very real choices. Perhaps turning down residencies because you can't afford the travel, hiding work because sharing feels too vulnerable, staying quiet because the room that you carved out for yourself doesn't feel safe enough just yet. It might even look like saying no to the Emerging Voices panel, because most of the time emerging apparently means that you might be working for free indefinitely. I really believe that when we talk about emerging voices, we're often actually talking about who had the financial cushion to emerge in the first place. It might be someone who had family support, savings, or even a partner's income, but it comes down to who didn't have to choose between making art and making rent. Here's the nuance: I'm more than aware that this isn't a single axis issue. Class, gender, disability, migration status, they all intersect. Platforms can democratize access, but they can also exploit it. They turn creatives into content machines with no security and no pay. Yes, community networks help. They really are vital, honestly. They don't really replace the systemic change. We need both the individual room and the structural shift that makes these rooms possible for everyone. I guess my personal declaration from rereading this essay is that if Woolf asked for a room and money, I think I'm entitled to ask for just a little bit more. I'm going to start with asking for permission to take up space without justification. Also for resources that actually sustain creative work, not just one-off grants that look good in a report, but fair pay, accessible funding, childcare for those who need it, and also travel support built into the opportunities from the start. I would love to ask for institutions to change who sits at the table, who makes the decisions, whose stories get amplified, and also whose get quietly shelved. I'm creating and sharing content now because waiting around for it didn't make the room that I needed for it appear. Claiming it did. And I've come to realise that when BAME creatives claim their rooms, and I mean like really claim them unapologetically, we don't just free individual voices. It instead reshapes the entire cultural conversation. We change what stories get told and who gets to tell them and who gets to decide what matters. I think this essay kind of woke me up to a mantra I'm hoping to carry out, and that's going to be create, share, and repeat. I think that's all I've got for this essay today, but I will hopefully be back. Otherwise, I've just flopped my New Year's resolution. Again, thanks for watching, and hopefully I will see you all next time. Bye!